Because using this idea of the moment, one can try to imagine these bones as images which condense, so to speak, their own conditions of production, of growing, of being made, of being killed, of being destroyed, of degenerating, of decaying. All of that is actually condensed in a bone. And bones are in a way like hard disks. They are media. They store the information which was given to them. They fossilize this information. They are like a photography, but in a very long exposure, so it's not made within a fraction of a second, but over, let's say, the period of a lifetime, and even beyond the lifetime, even after the lifetime, this photography continues to be exposed and can be read. And this bone, and this is also, let's say, the promise of forensics and of identification, these bones could potentially give information, at least about what happened to them. It cannot give information, though, about who they are, and that's the interesting thing. So, coming back to the probability, this is actually a bone I found in the mass grave where Andrea is supposed to be buried, and many bones are lying around like this human bone. And the probability of this being one of Andrea's bones is quite low. It's 2.4%, I calculated, because there's 41 people supposed to be buried there, and the bones are very disjointed. The ones which you find, hip blade, hip here, shoulder here, toe here. It's either, they were dispersed afterwards, or they were just put into this location by an explosion. These bones could give the information about what happened, about how they got there. They do fossilize these informations, at least part of them. Maybe not exactly who they are, but partly what happened to them. Only nobody, there's no observer wanting to read that information. And actually, there is, of course, this desire of wanting to know, what's the probability? Who is this person? Can we reconnect all these disjointed bones into a skeleton? Do we know who this belongs to? Can we assign all these bones to specific people? But actually, I think maybe after, thinking through this issue for quite a while, I think that maybe this is not exactly what the bones want, because these are, again, unidentified bones, bones which cannot be matched to anybody, bones which are waiting to be tested or cannot be tested for some reasons. They are nameless bones, and these bones will talk about their gender, about their stature, about their age. They will talk also about the conditions of nutrition, but the thing they will not say is their name. They will not, reveal their identity. And even though the people, who are handling them and who try to extract that information are really sympathetic, I really get the feeling that sometimes these bones really refuse actively to give that information, as if this was the last interrogation they were subjected to. And probably before they were shot, they had similar kinds of interrogations, and specifically they were shot because of certain factors in their identity. They were shot because they belonged to a certain class. They were shot because actually information was matched to them. And I really sympathize with those bones who do not want to say again, who do not want to give the name, who do not want to reveal the identity which led to their being shot. Or to say it more precisely, who do not want to reinsert themselves into the order of property, of face, of identity, of belonging, which established itself over their dead bodies. So in a way, I think there's also a refusal, maybe it's of course my own identification, of bones to return to an order of the subject, of the law, of identity, of belonging, of family, of patriarchy, of religion, of whatever you like, you know, and they say, no, we are fine, we are things, you know, we are matter. We do not care about your systems anymore. And we do not care about you wanting to reassign a face to us, an identity to us, a name to us, and also to sort of neatly rearrange us into individual subjects. We're fine being a mess. And this is also something which very often happens in these mass graves, that people, or the bodies, of course, and the bones, are completely mixed up with objects. The objects are the bullet cases, watches, wrist cuffs, whatever people had. You know, the shoe soles, very many clothes, and they are in a way all in the same order now. It doesn't matter whether it's a piece of metal, a coin, or a bone. It's all sort of mixed up. And you can imagine, or I can imagine, what sort of creature would we get if actually people would not try to resurrect or bring back to life, you know, the individual skeletons by giving them a name and a face. But what if this whole mess of the mass grave is being brought back to life at once? So you get a creature which has 3 kneecaps and 2 skulls, and consists of, you know, pieces of metal, and, you know, has 5 arms and all of that. It's actually, it would be a creature which corresponds to what actually happens in the mass grave, to the mass character of the mass grave. A creature which would completely defy all the orders of family, identity, property, nation belonging, by becoming something completely different, not an individual, but a individual. And actually, the person who gave me that idea was someone I met at the Saturday Mothers protest in Istanbul, a person called Hüsnü Yildiz, who has his own story with his own brother, who disappeared also in the 90s as a leftist guerrilla in Turkey. And also recently, the location of his grave was uncovered, and also, as basically all the mass graves which were recently discovered in Turkey, the number is swelling by the day. By now there are 350, with estimated 8,000 people in them, and none of them is being opened. So Hüsnü, he went on a hunger strike to force the exhumation of his brother. He just sat in the main square in the city and just refused to eat for 64 days. And after 64 days, finally, people came with excavators and so on to uncover 15 skeletons. But the twist in the story is that, of course, not of course, but there was no DNA tests run on the skeletons, so that Hüsnü now has 15 skeletons, and he doesn't know whether his brother is one of them or not, or who these people are, essentially, and no further, let's say, attempts of identification are being made. So that Hüsnü took the only sensible step. He simply said, all these 15 are my brothers and sisters, and also the 8,000 or more who are still missing in these mass graves. All these people are my family. And I think that this failure to identify can also be seen from a very different perspective, not only as a failure, but actually really as a representation of something which exists. And this manifests itself, you know, in a whole lot of failed images, of failed identifications, of skulls that do not match faces, of, you know, blurred scans, photographs which do not show anything, missing DNA tests, bones which are misplaced in the mail. That also happened in Turkey, you know, that the police would lose the bones of the people that they exhumed. All of that, these failed representations, failed identifications, represent something. They are not just failures, they represent not only the lacking will to do this, to go ahead to also pursue the perpetrators, they represent the lack of justice which is ongoing in all of these situations. I will show you a very last clip now. Sorry, I'm sorry. I have a cold. about 3 minutes now, and it's only
to the forensic science. If, for example, the new advances like the ADN investigations, no, when they try to identify a body with IDN analysis, if that's somehow like a way of trying to find that identity from science, not trying to get to that name of what you said, Bowish resist, you know?
Yes, I mean, I think the technologies are there. Certainly, as it sounds, there's different ways of determining identity by DNA, so it's not so simple, but the question is really, is there a framework to do this or not? And in many cases, it's just not there. It also really relates to the fact that this is rather expensive technology, and then, of course, the resources are being allocated. Or not. Yes.
Your work, you show it in Germany, principally. It's made for the German public, or it's in English, or we're seeing it. I ask that because of the connection between Turkey, Kurdistan, and Germany, and the repression, the armaments that were sent there.
Yeah.
The fact that 9,000 political activists disappeared in the 1990s is news to me. And do people in Germany, when they see your work, become more politically